My son-in-law slept with my wife, and a week later we went to sign the divorce paper. I pretended not to know anything. At the meeting, the lawyer slid a document across the table and said almost gently that 70% of my assets would go to her. I smiled. What I did after that is the reason I am telling this story now. Because sometimes the moment a man appears to lose everything is the exact moment he finally stops being blind. I am glad to have you here, and I want you to follow this story until the end, because nothing about it unfolded the way Melissa thought it would. I never imagined that at 63 years old I would be standing in the doorway of my own kitchen, one hand still wrapped around the handle of a coffee mug, watching my entire life collapse in a silence so violent it felt louder than a scream. It was a Wednesday afternoon, one of those dull, gray afternoons that had no right to become memorable. Rain had been threatening all morning, pressing low against the windows, turning the house dim even though every light in the kitchen was on. I had come home early because a client meeting had been canceled, and for once I had not called ahead. There had been a time when coming home early meant Melissa would look up from whatever she was doing and smile at me like I had brought sunlight with me. There had been a time when she would ask if I had eaten, when she would tell me there was soup on the stove or coffee still warm in the pot. But that day, the house had greeted me with a strange, expectant quiet. The kind of quiet that does not feel empty, but occupied by something trying not to breathe. I remember the small things first. I remember the smell of coffee gone bitter in the machine. I remember a blue scarf hanging from the back of one of the kitchen chairs, not dropped casually, but peeled off in haste. I remember a pair of men's work gloves on the counter, Marvin's gloves, the ones he wore when he came by to help with gutters or repairs, or whatever excuse he invented when my daughter Sarah was at work. I remember thinking, for one slow second, that maybe he had come to fix the loose hinge on the pantry door. I remember how willing the mind is to protect itself from the truth, until the truth becomes too large to ignore. Then I saw them. Melissa, my wife of 28 years, was pressed against Marvin, my son-in-law, in the narrow space between the kitchen island and the sliding glass door. Her hands were tangled in his hair. His mouth was against her neck, and there was a desperation in the way they held each other that made it impossible to call it a mistake or a moment or any of the weak, convenient words people use when they want to soften rot into something survived. The coffee mug slipped out of my hand and struck the tile floor. It broke into white pieces near my shoes. Coffee spread in a dark crescent around the shards, but I barely heard the crash over the pounding in my chest. I had heard that a person's heart could thunder, but I had never understood the phrase until that moment. It was not beating. It was trying to get out. Melissa pulled away first. Her face was flushed, not with shame yet, but with the heat of what I had interrupted. Then her eyes found mine, and I watched the color leave her face so quickly that for one strange second I thought she might faint. Marvin turned after her, still breathing hard, still disordered, still wearing the expression of a man caught stealing from a house he had been trusted to enter. His shirt was wrinkled where her fingers had gripped it. His hair stood up in the back from her hands. He looked younger than 32 in that instant, like a boy who had broken a window and hoped apology could put the glass back. "George," Melissa said, and my name cracked in her mouth. "I can explain." I raised my hand. I did not plan to. I did not rehearse it. My body simply moved before the rest of me could fall apart. "Don't," I said. My voice came out so calm it frightened even me. "Just don't." The silence after that was so heavy it seemed to press against the wall. Marvin opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed, and glanced at Melissa as if she were supposed to lead him out of this. That glance told me more than either of them could have confessed. This was not the first time they had been afraid together. This was not the first time they had whispered in panic. This was not the first time they had looked at each other and decided what version of reality they would offer the people they were betraying. "How long?" I asked. Melissa moved one hand to her blouse and began smoothing it down with nervous, useless strokes. She had always done that when she was caught off guard, even over small things, like forgetting to pay a bill or burning a pan of rolls before guests came over. For 28 years, I had known her gestures the way a man knows the rooms of his own house. Now every familiar movement felt obscene. "George," she said again, softer, almost pleading, "it is not what you think." I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. It came out cold and dry. "Really? Because what I think is that my wife has been sleeping with my daughter's husband in my house. Am I wrong?" Neither of them answered. Marvin looked at the floor. Melissa's eyes shone, but the tears had not arrived yet. She was still calculating. Even then, even standing there exposed, she was thinking about what shape her face should take, what tone might work, which angle would make me hesitate. "Sarah does not know," Marvin whispered. I turned my head slowly toward him. This was the man I had helped move into his first apartment with my daughter. This was the man I had taught how to repair a leaking sink, because he had admitted, laughing, that his father had never shown him how to fix anything. This was the man I had loaned money to without telling Sarah, because he was embarrassed. This was the man who called me George in public, but had once, after 3 drinks at Thanksgiving, clapped me on the shoulder and said I was the closest thing to a real father he had ever had. "Of course she does not know," I said. "If she knew, do you think I would be standing here having a conversation?" Melissa took 1 step toward me. "We need to talk about this rationally." Rationally? I tasted the word. It was bitter enough to make my jaw tighten. "You want to discuss this rationally?" "Yes," she said, and I saw something change in her expression. It was small, almost invisible, but I had been married to her long enough to recognize it. She was moving from fear to control. Melissa was at her most dangerous when she believed she could turn a room by making herself sound reasonable. "We are adults. We cannot make this worse by screaming." I looked at her. For years, I had mistaken her calmness for maturity. I had believed her ability to lower her voice during conflict meant she was the steady one. But now, watching her stand there with Marvin behind her, I saw that the calm was not peace. It was strategy. "You made it worse before I walked in," I said. Her mouth tightened. "It is not that simple." Marvin lifted his head. "George, I never meant for this to happen." "No," I said, looking at him. "I imagine you meant for it to continue without anyone finding out." He flinched, but Melissa recovered faster. She always did. "You are angry," she said, as if identifying my emotion reduced it to something manageable. "You have every right to be angry, but what Marvin and I have is not some cheap affair. It is real." I stared at her. "Real? It is love," she said. That word should have broken something in me, but instead it did something colder. It cleared the fog. "Love." She stood in the kitchen where I had made breakfast for our daughter before school, where Melissa and I had argued about bills and laughed over burnt steaks and hosted Christmas dinners, where I had held her after her mother died, and she called her betrayal love. The audacity of it was almost pure. She had not simply broken vows. She had tried to decorate the wreckage with a word that belonged to better people. "Love," I repeated. Her chin lifted slightly, because now she thought she had found the moral ground. "Yes, I know you will hate hearing that, but it is true. We did not plan this. It developed over time." "Over time," I said, and suddenly all the missing pieces began sliding into place with a precision that made me sick. The late book club nights, the errands that took longer than they should have, Marvin's sudden habit of stopping by when Sarah was at work, the way Melissa had started checking her reflection before he came over, the way Marvin watched her pour wine at family dinners, the small laughs that died when I entered a room, the coded glances I had seen and dismissed because the alternative was too ugly to consider. I had not been blind because the signs were invisible. I had been blind because trusting someone makes you generous with explanation. "I see," I said. Marvin frowned. "You see. I see that you have made your choice. Both of you." Melissa looked uncertain now. She expected rage. She expected bargaining. She expected me to ask what I had done wrong. She expected me to beg for the marriage or threaten Marvin, or collapse into the role she had probably prepared for me. But I was not giving her the scene she needed. I turned to leave, then stopped and looked back at her. "I assume you will want a divorce." She blinked. "We have not discussed that." "Discuss it," I said. "When you decide what you want, let me know." Then I walked away. I left them standing in the kitchen beside the broken mug and the spilled coffee. And as I went down the hall, I heard them begin whispering behind me in urgent, breathless tones. Melissa hissed Marvin's name. Marvin said something too low for me to catch. Then the kitchen door clicked, and the house fell into a different kind of silence. That night I lay in the guest bedroom with the lights off and watched the ceiling slowly darken as the last daylight bled out of the room. I could hear Melissa moving in our bedroom down the hall. She opened drawers, closed them, walked to the bathroom, ran water, stopped it, opened the closet, then shut it again. She was restless. I knew her restless sounds. I had spent nearly 3 decades falling asleep beside them. Eventually she grew still, and I realized, with a bitterness so sharp it made my eyes burn, that she was probably able to sleep because she thought the worst part was over. She thought I had seen, absorbed the shock, and chosen dignity. She thought my silence meant weakness, or exhaustion, or surrender. Marvin had left less than an hour after I found them. I watched his blue pickup pull out of the driveway from the darkened guest room window. He sat in the truck for nearly a minute before starting it, both hands locked on the steering wheel. I wondered if he was crying. I wondered if he was rehearsing his face for Sarah. I wondered if my daughter would kiss him when he came home. Ask him how his day had been. Maybe tell him about some ordinary frustration at work while he carried my wife's perfume on his collar. The thought nearly drove me out of bed. For one wild minute, I wanted to call Sarah and tell her everything. I wanted to burn the whole thing down immediately. But then I saw, with cruel clarity, what would happen. Melissa would cry. Marvin would deny. Sarah would fracture in real time. The truth would spill out in jagged pieces. And the two people who had betrayed us would scramble to control the story. I had walked in on them, yes, but I had no plan, no structure, no protection. Rage would make me loud, and loud men are easy to paint as unstable. So I lay still. I let the hurt move through me in waves, so deep they seemed to change the shape of my body. There was denial first, not denial of what I had seen, but denial of its permanence. A part of me kept reaching backward for the life I had had that morning. It kept saying that maybe this could be contained. Maybe there was a version where Melissa wept and begged and Marvin disappeared, and Sarah never knew. Then shame came, because even inside my own head I was humiliated. I pictured neighbors finding out, friends lowering their voices, people thinking poor George, he never saw it coming. I imagined Sarah looking at me with pity, and that was almost worse than imagining her pain. Then came grief, raw and plain. A grief for the marriage I had believed in, and for the man I had been inside. Finally, sometime after midnight, something else arrived. It was not peace. It was not strength. It was a hard, cold steadiness that settled at the base of my spine. By morning, I knew two things. Melissa had not only betrayed me, she intended to manage me, and I would not be managed. The next 7 days became the longest performance of my life. Melissa avoided me the first morning. She stayed upstairs until she heard my car pull out of the driveway. But I did not go to the office immediately. I drove 2 blocks away, parked beneath a maple tree, and sat there with the engine off while rain began to tap against the windshield. My hands were shaking. I had shaved, dressed, tied my shoes, poured coffee, and stepped around the stain from the mug without speaking to her. Each ordinary act required a violence of self-control I had not known I possessed. At 8:37, Melissa's car remained in the driveway. At 8:44, I saw Marvin's truck turn onto our street in my rearview mirror. He slowed before the house. He did not pull in. Not yet. He drove past like a cautious animal, circling a trap. I watched him disappear at the corner, then return 10 minutes later from the opposite direction. This time he parked half a block away, not in front of the house. My phone buzzed once. I looked down and saw a text from Melissa. "Have a good day. We should talk tonight." I laughed softly in the car. It sounded like someone else. When I returned home that evening, Melissa had transformed. The shattered mug was gone. The floor smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. Dinner was in the oven. She had set the table with cloth napkins, something she had not done for ordinary weeknights in years. She wore a soft gray sweater and small earrings, tasteful, harmless, wife-like. When I stepped inside, she called from the kitchen, "You are home early enough for dinner." I made pot roast. There it was, domestic tenderness deployed like a curtain over a crime scene. "Smells good," I said. She watched me carefully while I washed my hands. "How was work?" "Busy." "You look tired." "I am." She moved behind me and placed one hand lightly on my shoulder. I nearly recoiled, but I did not. Her touch, once familiar, felt like an actor's hand placed on a prop. "George," she said quietly, "about yesterday." I turned off the faucet and dried my hands slowly. "Not tonight." Her fingers tightened for just a second, then released. "We cannot just pretend nothing happened." "No," I said, looking at her through the reflection in the dark kitchen window. "We cannot." She waited, but I gave her nothing more. That was the first time I saw fear return to her eye. Not guilt, fear. Guilt makes people confess. Fear makes them strategize. On Tuesday, I called my assistant and told her I would be working from home, but did not want calls forwarded unless urgent. Then I left the house at the usual time, drove around the block, parked at the end of the street, and walked back through the side gate with the careful patience of a man twice my age. I let myself in through the basement door and remained upstairs in the spare room, where I could see the driveway through a narrow gap in the curtains. Marvin arrived at 2:15 p.m. in the blue pickup. This time he did not park down the block. He used the driveway. The arrogance of it surprised me, and then it did not. People who have survived one exposure often mistake survival for permission. He took a key from his pocket, the emergency key we had given him years before when Sarah had locked herself out during a winter storm. and let himself into my home. I stood in the dim spare room and listened. Their voices drifted up through vents and old wooden bones of the house. At first, they spoke in low tones. "You should not have come," Melissa said, though her voice held no real anger. "I had to see you," Marvin replied. "I have been going crazy." "Keep your voice down. He knows what he saw. That is different from knowing everything." A pause. Then Marvin said, "What does that mean?" "It means George is controlled by shame. He will not want Sarah to know. He will not want people talking. If we are careful, we can still handle this." I closed my eyes. There she was, the woman beneath the wife, not frantic, not helpless, not swept away by passion. Calculating. Marvin's voice trembled. "Sarah asked me last night why I was acting weird." "What did you say?" "That work has been stressful." "Good. Stay with that. Do not overtalk. You always overtalk when you panic." I heard the quiet slap of her words land on him. It was not tenderness. It was command. Marvin murmured something I could not make out. Then Melissa softened her voice in that practiced way I knew too well. "Come here," she said. "You are making yourself sick." Within 20 minutes, their voices moved toward the living room. I did not go downstairs. I took photographs of Marvin's truck in the driveway. I wrote the time in a small black notebook. I wrote the date. I wrote entered with key. Stayed until 8 p.m. I did not yet know whether evidence would matter legally, morally, or only to keep myself from feeling insane. But I wrote it down because facts were cleaner than feelings. On Wednesday, he came again. 1:45 p.m. This time I watched from the kitchen window after deliberately returning home at noon and leaving my car in the closed garage. I saw him enter. I saw the curtains shift in the living room. At 3:52 p.m., they stepped out through the back door. Melissa laughed softly at something he said and lifted her hands to straighten his collar. It was such a small gesture. That was what made it unbearable. There was no urgency in it, no fear, no shame. It was tender and domestic, the way a wife might adjust her husband before he left for work. Watching it, I understood that the betrayal had not only been sexual. She had been practicing another life with him inside mine. That evening, Sarah called. Melissa answered in the kitchen, while I sat in the adjoining room pretending to read. "Saturday dinner still works?" Sarah asked, her voice bright through the speaker. "Of course, sweetheart," Melissa said, and the sweetness in her tone made my stomach twist. "I was just thinking about making that lemon chicken you like." "Marvin loves that too," Sarah said. "He has been weird this week, though. Maybe he needs a good meal." Melissa's fingers tightened around the phone. I saw it. I saw the tiny blanching of her knuckles. "Weird how?" "I do not know." "Distracted. Guilty. He keeps checking his phone. Maybe work stuff." Melissa recovered. "Men get like that when they are stressed. Do not take it personally." The phrase hung in the air like smoke. "Do not take it personally." Advice from a mother to a daughter whose husband was sleeping with that same mother. I watched Melissa tilt her head, smile at nothing, and ask Sarah whether she was eating enough vegetable. She listened with perfect maternal concern. When the call ended, she turned to me and said, "Sarah sends her love." I smiled back. "Tell her we are looking forward to Saturday." That night, I sat alone in the guest room and pressed my fist into my mouth until my teeth hurt. Not because Melissa had fooled me, because she had fooled Sarah with such ease. Thursday was when she made her first official move. I was in my study around 9 in the evening when she knocked softly on the doorframe. Even though the door was open, she had dressed carefully. The blue dress, the one I had once told her made her look younger, happier. Like the woman I had met at a charity dinner when I was 35 and still believed success could protect a man from loneliness. Her hair was styled the way she wore it in our early years, brushed away from her face, soft around the jaw. It was a costume of memory. "George," she said, stepping inside, "we need to talk." I placed a bookmark between the pages of the book I had not been reading. "All right." She sat across from me in the leather chair, crossed one leg over the other, then uncrossed. Her fingers went to her wedding ring. She twisted it slowly, and for a moment I wondered whether she knew how theatrical that looked. "I have been thinking about us," she began. "About us? Yes, about our marriage, about where we are." I nodded, giving her the room she wanted. She inhaled, then exhaled through her nose. "We have not been happy for a long time." There it was. The rewriting had begun. "I was not aware you felt that way," I said. Her eyes sharpened. "That is part of the problem, George. You are not aware of how I feel. You have not been for years." The accusation landed because it contained a grain of truth, and that was how manipulation worked best. It did not invent entirely. It selected, polished, and weaponized. Had I been attentive enough? No. Had I worked too much? Yes. Had I allowed comfort to become distance? Probably. But between marital neglect and sleeping with our daughters, husband lay a gulf wide enough to bury whole families. I suppose I have been busy, I said. Busy, she repeated, with a sad little smile. You are always busy. Work, investments, calls, clients, that cabin. Everything has had a place in your life except me. I watched her. Her voice was quiet, wounded, persuasive. This was the Melissa friends admired. Intelligent, composed, emotionally fluent. She could make selfishness sound like suffering if given enough uninterrupted time. I did not know you felt excluded, I said. Would it have mattered if you did? She asked. I let the silence sit. It made her uncomfortable. Good. She looked down at her ring. I think we need space. A trial separation, maybe. Not ugly, not dramatic, just honest. A trial separation, I said. Yes, we can tell Sarah we have grown apart. That happens. It is sad, but it happens. And Marvin's. She flinched almost imperceptibly. What about him? How do we explain it to him? He is family, she said carefully. He will understand that adults sometimes need to make difficult decisions. Adults, I said. She leaned forward. Please do not do that. Do what? Turn every word into an accusation. I almost admired her. She was asking me not to weaponize words while using them like knives. What would the separation look like? I asked. Relief passed over her face. She thought she had moved me. Temporarily, I would stay in the house. It makes sense. I maintain it. And it would be disruptive for me to leave suddenly. You could take an apartment near your office, or the cabin if you prefer quiet. We could divide the savings, maybe 50-50 at first. The investment portfolio would need to be reviewed, of course, but I think we could be fair. Fair? Yes, she said quickly. I am not trying to punish you. I do not want to fight, but I gave up a career for this household. I gave you stability. I hosted your clients. I took care of your life so you could build your business. That matters. It did matter. That was the infuriating thing. Her contributions were real. Her entitlement to respect was real. But she was using truth as camouflage for greed. What about the cabin? I asked. She almost smiled. You love the cabin. I have never cared for it. It is too isolated. Too much maintenance. You should have it. The cabin, 40 acres of wooded land and lakefront, she still believed, was merely a rustic retreat with bad plumbing and too many mosquitoes. She had never asked about the surveys, the development rights, the quiet improvements, the adjacent parcels acquired over years. She did not know what she was offering me because she had never respected the things I valued enough to understand them. I will think about it, I said. She stood, smoothed her dress, and gave me a look so full of manufactured sadness that I almost felt tired. I just want us to be honest about what we want. I looked at her and said, of course. When she left, she hummed in the hallway, softly, unconsciously. That wounded me more than the conversation. She was pleased with herself. She believed she had guided me into the first corridor of my own removal. Friday was the day I stopped improvising. Richard Hawthorne's office was on the 18th floor of a downtown building with dark windows and quiet elevators. I had known Richard for 15 years. He had handled contracts, acquisitions, employment disputes, and the kind of problems that successful businesses attract like flies. He was not warm exactly, but he was precise. And at that moment, precision mattered more than comfort. He listened without interruption as I described what I had seen, what Melissa had said, Marvin's visits, the proposed separation, and my concern that my wife intended to extract as much as possible while concealing the affair. His pen moved occasionally. His face revealed nothing. When I finished, he leaned back. What do you want, George? Justice. That is a feeling, not an objective. I want her unable to profit from destroying my family. He studied me over his glasses. That is closer, but I need to be clear. Anger makes people careless. Carelessness is expensive. If you want revenge, go home and scream. If you want protection, we can talk. I sat there with my hands folded and forced myself to breathe. Protection. Good. Then we discussed structure, disclosure, valuation, timing, and risk. For the next 2 hours, Richard walked me through the legal landscape with the patient brutality of a surgeon describing where he would cut. Henderson Business Solutions had already been reorganized under Henderson Holdings, LLC, for tax and operational purposes months earlier, after Richard and my accountant suggested it during a planning review. Several investment properties and contract rights had been moved under the holding company. Some assets Melissa assumed were personal were, In fact, company link. Cabin property, which she dismissed, had a recent appraisal that made it more valuable than she knew. The suburban house had equity, but not as much as she imagined, and certain business lines of credit had been secured properly against it before any divorce filing, during a period when both of us benefited from the business income. "You are not hiding assets," Richard said. "Do not confuse complexity with concealment. But if she chooses not to investigate the complexity, that is her attorney's failure. Can she undo it later? She can try. Anyone can try. The question is whether she can prove fraud. If documents are accurate, if she has counsel, if disclosures are made in legally sufficient form, and if she signs voluntarily, she will have a steep hill." I looked at the city through his window. Cars moved below like small metallic insects. "She wants to make me look like the fool." Richard capped his pen. "Then stop caring how you look. Care about what you sign." That evening, Melissa cooked pot roast, lit candles, opened wine, and reached for my hand across the table like an actress in the final act of a play. "I love you, George," she said. "Whatever happens, I want you to know our years together meant everything to me." I looked at her fingers resting over mine, the ring still on her hand, the candlelight softening her face into the woman I used to believe she was. "I love you too, Melissa," I said. It was the last lie I ever told her. On Monday morning, the air was crisp and cold enough to make the windows fog at the edges. Melissa was already downstairs when I entered the kitchen, sitting beside a manila folder with both hands around her coffee mug. She had rehearsed this version too, less seductive than Thursday, more serious. A woman doing something difficult but necessary. "Good morning," I said, pouring coffee. "George," she began, "I have been thinking about our conversation." I sat across from her. "So have I. I think we should make this official. The separation." Her hand touched the folder. "I spoke to a lawyer." "Of course." She opened the folder. Papers lay inside, neat and flagged. "Her name is Jennifer Morse. She says we can handle this amicably if we both remain reasonable." "Reasonable?" I said. Melissa's eyes flicked to me, then away. "Yes, since there are no minor children. This is mostly asset division. The house would remain with me, along with the primary savings. You would keep your retirement account and the cabin. We would split the investment portfolio 60-40. "In whose favor?" "In mine," she said, with a tiny dip of her eyes meant to signal modest discomfort. "I gave up my career for the marriage. You worked part-time for 3 years. I maintained our home for 28. "You did." She seemed strengthened by the concession. "My attorney believes I could reasonably ask for more, but I do not want to be cruel." The restraint it took not to laugh exhausted me. "And alimony, temporary support, 2 years, just enough for me to get on my feet. With the house, the savings, and 60% of the portfolio." Her voice tightened. "George, I am trying to do this gently." "No," I said. "You are trying to do this efficiently." She stared at me. For a second, the mask thinned. Then she recovered. "Can you blame me for wanting to avoid ugliness?" I thought of Sarah laughing on the phone, unaware that her mother and husband had already made ugliness their private language. "I will have Richard review it." "Richard Hawthorne?" Melissa's mouth tightened. "Is he not a little aggressive?" "He is thorough. I do not want this to become a war." "Then tell Jennifer to come prepared." Tuesday afternoon, we sat in Richard's conference room. The table was polished mahogany. The chairs were expensive enough to be uncomfortable. Jennifer Morse arrived 10 minutes early, carrying a leather folder and the nervous confidence of someone who had practiced being firm in the mirror. Melissa wore a navy suit and pearl. She looked composed, tragic, respectable. Marvin had probably told her she looked beautiful before she left. I wondered whether she had kissed him in the parking lot somewhere before stepping into this room to discuss taking my life apart. Richard began without ceremony. "Let us walk through the proposed division." For 45 minutes, they discussed my marriage as if it were a business dissolution. The house, valued at approximately $450,000, subject to mortgage and encumbrances. Savings accounts totaling roughly $230,000. Retirement funds, personal vehicles, household furnishings. The investment portfolio, listed by Jennifer at $7 million, though Richard's eyebrow rose when she referred to it as personal without qualification. "My client has been generous," Jennifer said. "Mrs. Henderson could pursue a larger portion." "Based on what precedent?" Richard asked. Jennifer shuffled papers. "Length of marriage, domestic contribution, income disparity. Relevant, certainly, but not a blank check. Melissa's jaw tightened. I watched her begin to understand that Jennifer might not be the weapon she imagined. "What about Mr. Henderson's business interests?" Richard asked. Jennifer frowned. "Henderson Business Solutions." "Yes." Melissa looked at me. "That business is your work, George. I am not trying to interfere with that." Richard placed a document on the table. "It is currently valued at approximately $3 million as an operating entity." Melissa's eyes widened. "2.3 million. You never asked," I said quietly. Jennifer began writing quickly. "That changes the settlement landscape." "It does," Richard said, "especially because Mr. Henderson has received an offer connected to a larger transaction involving Henderson Holdings, LLC. Henderson Holdings, Jennifer repeated. "The parent company," Richard said. "The expected sale value is $8 million. The room changed. Melissa did not move, but greed moved through her face like light through thin fabric. Surprise first, then calculation, then caution, because she knew she should not appear too eager. Jennifer cleared her throat. "Given those numbers, we would need to revisit the proposal." "Indeed," Richard said. "Mr. Henderson is willing to offer Mrs. Henderson 70% of the liquid marital assets, including the house, personal savings, and the portion of the investment accounts properly categorized as distributable, in exchange for retaining all business interests and the cabin property." Jennifer looked startled. Melissa looked stunned. 70%, she said. "Yes, that is more than I asked for." I met her eyes. "I want this over." Her face softened into gratitude, so fast it was almost innocent. "George," she whispered, "thank you." I nodded. "You are welcome. There are moments in life when silence feels like a locked door. That was one of them. Everything she needed to know was in the documents. Everything she misunderstood was available for her attorney to question. She could have asked for independent valuation. She could have delayed. She could have wondered why Richard was so agreeable. She could have remembered that I had never been careless with numbers in my life. But Melissa saw 70% and stopped listening to anything else. Friday arrived with sunshine, so bright it felt indecent. Melissa dressed in a cream-colored dress and wore the pearl necklace I had given her for our 20th anniversary. She looked like a woman attending the ceremony of her own victory. In the car, she touched my arm and said, "Are you nervous?" "No, I just want you to know I appreciate how gracious you have been." "Gracious," I said. "Yes, not many men would handle this with dignity." I looked at the road. "I suppose not." In Richard's conference room, the documents were ready. Jennifer appeared more confident, perhaps because she had persuaded herself that 70% meant triumph. Richard moved through the papers carefully. He did not rush. He identified signature lines. He explained transfers. He used accurate language. Every opportunity existed for Jennifer to slow the process and ask more. She did not. Melissa signed with a flourish. She signed the house transfer. She signed the settlement acknowledgement. She signed the asset division. She signed the pages confirming that she had counsel, that she understood she could seek independent appraisal, that she entered the agreement voluntarily. I signed where indicated. Then Richard slid another document to me. "This finalizes the sale of Henderson Holdings, LLC, to Morrison Consulting Group." Melissa watched my pen move across the page. Afterward, we stood in the hallway and shook hands, as if something clean had occurred. Jennifer said we had handled everything maturely. Melissa hugged me in the parking garage. A brief, awkward embrace that smelled of expensive perfume and triumph. "I will start moving my things this weekend," I said. "There is no rush," she replied softly. "Take your time." Of course there was no rush. In her mind, the house was hers. The money was coming, Marvin was waiting, and I was already becoming background. That night, I drove to the cabin. The sky darkened over the lake in slow bands of purple and black. I ate a sandwich standing at the kitchen counter, because I did not yet know how to sit alone at a table without feeling the absence of the life I had been expelled from. Later, I took a bottle of scotch to the porch and watched mist gather over the water. The silence was immense. Not comforting, not yet, just immense. At 9:11 p.m., my phone rang. "Melissa, George," she said when I answered. Her voice was controlled but tight. "I hope I am not bothering you." "Not at all. How are you settling in?" "There seems to be a problem." "What kind of problem?" I went to the bank. Jennifer told me the investment transfer should begin immediately, but the accounts are not accessible. The bank says most of the portfolio is connected to something called Henderson Holdings, LLC. I looked at the lake. A fish moved beneath the surface, making one widening ring. That sounds right. A pause. What does that mean? Henderson Holdings is the parent company. The parent company of what? Several assets, including Henderson Business Solution. Her breathing changed. George, yes, the settlement said I was receiving 70% of the liquid asset. You did. No, the portfolio was $7 million. The portfolio you are referring to was largely held by Henderson Holdings, which was sold today. Silence, then slower. Are you telling me that money was part of the business sale? Yes, but you said the business was worth $3 million and sold for $3.8. Henderson Holdings sold for $3.8. Henderson Business Solutions was one component. I could hear papers rustling. I imagined her at the kitchen table, the same table where she had laid out her first proposal, now surrounded by documents she had signed but not understood. Then what did I get? The house, the personal savings, the distributable assets listed in the final schedule. My personal retirement portion as agreed, 70% of those. The house has a mortgage, she said, voice thinning. Yes, and liens, business lines secured against it. You used our house as collateral. At the time, it was my house too, and the business supported our life for decades. You did this on purpose. I accepted your proposal for an amicable division. No, she whispered. No, you trapped me. You brought an attorney. Jennifer did not understand. Then Jennifer failed you. The first sob escaped her. It was small, almost like a hiccup. How long have you known? About the finances. About Marvin's. I let the question hang. Long enough. George, please. No, you do not even know what I was going to say. Yes, I do. You were going to explain. You tried that in the kitchen. This is cruel. No, Melissa. Cruel was letting Sarah thank Marvin for helping her father while he was sleeping with her mother. Cruel was telling me you wanted honesty while planning how to take the house. Cruel was answering our daughter's call and giving her marriage advice while betraying her in the same breath. She was crying openly now. I cannot afford the house. Then sell it. With the liens, I will lose money. Then ask Marvin. The silence that followed was the sound of a fantasy punctured. You know everything, she said. I know enough. George, we can fix this. We fixed it today. I did not understand what I signed. You chose not to. Her voice dropped. What am I supposed to do? I looked out at the dark lake, at the reflection of stars beginning to appear between drifting clouds. The same thing I was supposed to do when I found you with Marvin in my kitchen. Figure it out. Then I ended the call and turned off the phone. For the first time in weeks, I slept. Not peacefully exactly. Peace was too generous a word. But deeply, my body shut down, as if it had been waiting for permission. The aftermath did not explode all at once. It cracked in stages. First came Melissa's calls, then texts, then messages through Jennifer, then silence, followed by more frantic calls when the bank confirmed what Richard had already known. She could not access what had never been personally heard. The house payments were heavier than she could handle. The savings were smaller than she believed. Marvin, who had apparently promised that he had money set aside, had debt instead. Credit cards, a truck payment, a personal loan Sarah did not know about. The romance that had glowed in stolen afternoons under my roof began to look different under fluorescent bank lights and legal invoices. Sarah called me on a Tuesday evening. I knew from the first sound of her voice that Melissa had reached her. Dad, she said, what is going on? I closed my eyes. What did your mother tell you? She said you tricked her. She said she might lose the house. She asked me for $15,000. Did she say why she needed it? Paperwork, bank delays. I do not know, Sarah swallowed. Why did you not tell me about the divorce? Because I was trying to protect you until I understood what to say. That sounds like something people say when they are hiding the worst part. My daughter had always been quick, even wounded, even confused. She went straight to the bruise. You are right, I said. There is a worst part. The silence on the line changed. Dad, your mother has been having an affair with Marvin. For several seconds, there was nothing. Then a sharp intake of breath. No, I am sorry. No, do not say that. Do not say it like it is real. I caught them in the house. No, she said again, and this time the word broke. Marvin would not. We are trying for a baby. That sentence hit me harder than anything Melissa had said. Trying for a baby, while he was betraying her with her own mother. I pressed my palm against my eyes and felt, for the first time since the kitchen, something inside me tremble with helplessness. I am so sorry, sweetheart. How long? I do not know. Months at least. She began crying, but softly, like she was afraid of being overheard. "He is in the shower," she whispered. "He is in the shower right now. Do you need me to come get you?" "I do not know what I need." "Then do nothing tonight except stay safe. Come to the cabin if you want. No explanation necessary." 2 days later, Sarah arrived with 3 suitcases and a face so pale she looked ill. She stood in the cabin doorway, 30 seconds from collapsing but too proud to ask for help. I took the bags from her hands. She let me. That was when I knew how bad it was. My daughter had always insisted on carrying her own weight. She slept until noon the next day. Then she sat on the dock for 3 hours without moving, wrapped in one of my old coats, staring at the water. I watched from the kitchen window and did not interrupt. There are pains a parent cannot enter. You can stand nearby with food and warmth and a place to land, but you cannot climb inside the wound and close it from within. That evening, she pushed a piece of fish around her plate and said, I confronted him. I set down my fork. How did it go? He denied it first, said you were lying because you were bitter about Mom. Then I told him I had already spoken to her. She admitted it. Sarah's laugh was empty. Not at first. She said she and Marvin had developed an emotional connection. I asked if that connection involved having sex in your house. Then she cried and said she never meant to hurt me. Her eyes lifted to mine. Something in them had aged. Never meant to hurt me. How do people say that after doing the one thing designed to hurt you most? They say it because admitting the truth would make them monsters in their own mind. Marvin cried too, she said. He said Mom seduced him. He said he was confused. He said he loved me the whole time. I felt heat rise in my chest. Of course he did. I asked him if he loved me while he drove to your house. I asked him if he loved me while he used the key you gave him. I asked him if he loved me when he came home and kissed me after touching my mother. Her voice shook, but she did not cry. He said I was being cruel. I looked at her, and I saw the same realization I had seen in myself. Betrayal was not only the act, it was the demand afterward that the wounded person remain gentle. In the following weeks, the family collapsed into separate ruin. Sarah filed for divorce. Marvin moved back in with his parents after Melissa refused to let him stay in the house unless he contributed money he did not have. Melissa's house entered foreclosure. She called me repeatedly, sometimes furious, sometimes pleading, sometimes frighteningly calm. One call came at nearly midnight. I gave you 28 years, she said. You also gave my daughter a wound she will carry for the rest of her life. I made a mistake. No, a mistake is forgetting an anniversary. You built a second life out of deception. You are enjoying this. I looked around the dark cabin kitchen, at the single cup in the sink, at the empty chair across from me. No, Melissa, enjoyment would require there to be something left in me that your choices did not poison. She grew quiet. You sound different. I am. Do you hate me? I thought about it. Hate would have been easier. Hate is hot. It keeps you company. What I felt was colder, more spacious, and much lonelier. I do not know what you are to me anymore. The house sold at auction 6 weeks later for less than she owed. Bankruptcy followed. Melissa moved into a small apartment near the edge of town and took a cashier job at a grocery store where, according to Sarah, she sometimes saw former friends and pretended not to notice the way their faces changed. Marvin's divorce became public enough that people stopped inviting him places. He lost the easy charm that had carried him through rooms. He became, at 32, a man known for one sentence. He slept with his wife's mother. Months passed, but not in the healing way people promise. They passed like cold water dripping through stone. Sarah stayed at the cabin. She worked from the converted loft as a freelance graphic designer, slowly rebuilding a life that no longer had a husband at its center. Some mornings she seemed almost like herself. She would come downstairs with coffee, make a dry joke about one of her clients, and stand in the doorway with sunlight in her hair, looking briefly like the child who used to run through our backyard with bare feet and grass stains. Other mornings she woke from nightmares and did not speak until afternoon. Once I found her sitting on the bathroom floor, holding a pregnancy test box she had bought months earlier and never used. She looked up at me and said, I thought I was going to make a family with him. I sat on the floor beside her because there are some griefs that make chairs feel too formal. I know, he took that too. Yes, and Mom took my mother. I had no answer for that because she was right. Melissa was alive, but the mother Sarah had trusted was gone. The cabin, which had once been my escape, became something stranger. It was shelter, but not comfort. The lake was beautiful, but beauty did not erase anything. It simply existed beside the damage. indifferent and steady. I began to understand that survival was not the same as recovery. Recovery implies returning. There was nowhere to return to. 6 months after the divorce, I stood on the dock at dawn watching mist rise from the water. The air smelled of pine and cold mud. Sarah came out carrying 2 mugs of coffee and wearing one of my old sweatshirts. She handed me one and sat beside me. "I had the dream again," she said. "The house." She nodded, but this time I did not wake up screaming. "That sounds like progress." "Maybe." She stared out at the lake. "Dad, do you regret what you did?" I knew the question would come someday. I had asked it of myself many times, though less often as the months went on. "No," I said. Even now, she is living in that apartment. She looks awful. Aunt Linda says she has lost weight. I am sorry for that, but not responsible." "No," I said, "not responsible." Sarah wrapped both hands around her mug. "I feel sorry for her sometimes, and then I hate myself for it. You can feel sorry for someone and still know they are dangerous to you. She called me yesterday. I turned to her. She said she misses me. She said she misses being my mother. "What did you say?" Sarah's face tightened. I said I miss having one. The words hung in the morning air. Across the lake, a loon called once long and mournful. It sounded less like freedom now than warning. Later that afternoon, Melissa called me. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me answered. "George," she said. Her voice was smaller than before, stripped of polish. "I am not calling for money." "Then why are you calling?" "To apologize. Really apologize." I said nothing. I know it does not fix anything. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. But I am sorry for the affair, for lying, for hurting Sarah, for thinking I could step out of one life and into another without paying for what I broke. "Why, Melissa?" I asked. "Why throw away 28 years? She was quiet for so long, I heard the hum of my refrigerator. "Because I felt invisible," she finally said. "Because Marvin looked at me like I was still a woman, and not just a wife in a house full of routines. Because I was selfish enough to mistake being desired for being loved. Because I wanted to feel alive and did not care who had to bleed for it." It was the most honest thing she had said since this began. "You could have talked to me. I know. We could have separated, gone to counseling, fought honestly. I know. And instead you chose him." "Yes," she whispered. There was nothing left to say after that. She asked me to tell Sarah she loved her. I told her I would. When I ended the call, I sat in my study for a long time and looked at the shelves of books I had moved from the old house. Some still smelled faintly of that place. Dust, lemon cleaner, Melissa's candles, memory trapped in paper. I realized closure is not warmth. Sometimes closure is only the final removal of doubt. That evening, Sarah and I ate dinner on the deck. The sunset spread over the lake in shades of copper and red, too beautiful for the ruins it overlooked. She told me about a new client. I told her Richard wanted to discuss investment opportunity. We spoke like people practicing normal life. After she went to bed, I walked to the end of the dock. The night was cold. The stars were sharp. Water lapped softly against the piling. I thought of Melissa scanning groceries under fluorescent lights, learning the weight of consequences one small humiliation at a time. I thought of Marvin in his childhood bedroom, surrounded by old trophies and unpaid bills. I thought of Sarah sleeping behind me, not healed, not restored, but breathing through another night. And I thought of myself, a 63-year-old man who had lost his marriage, his trust, his old home, and the version of himself who believed loyalty was returned simply because it was given. People might say I won. They might look at the cabin, the business sale, the preserved assets, and call it justice. But standing there under the black sky, I did not feel like a winner. I felt like a survivor walking through the rooms of a house after a fire, grateful to be alive, but unable to touch anything without getting ash on my hands. The lake was mine. The silence was mine. The future was mine too, technically. But some victories arrive so cold that they feel almost like another kind of loss. I had protected my dignity. I had protected what I built. I had given Melissa exactly what she asked for, and let her discover the truth inside her own signature. Yet none of that gave Sarah back her marriage. None of it gave me back the kitchen before the mug fell. None of it erased the image of my wife in Marvin's arms, or the sound of my daughter whispering no into the phone as her life split open. So I stood there until my hands went numb around the railing, listening to the water move in the dark. I understood then that happiness was not waiting on the other side of betrayal like a prize. Peace was not a warm room or a clean ending. Sometimes peace was only the absence of people who had learned how to destroy you. Sometimes survival was only choosing not to return to the fire. By dawn, the mist would rise again from the lake, and Sarah would eventually come outside with coffee, and we would sit beside each other without pretending anything was whole. We would continue because that was what remained. Not forgiveness, not restoration, not the shining freedom people imagine when they hear a story like mine. Only breath, cold air, water, silence, and the hard, permanent knowledge that the life I once had was gone, and the man who had lived it was gone with